Good morning. Barry Bryson here. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're continuing our study of Ecclesiastes, and we're in chapter 7, and we're going to take a couple of days to consider the poetic section with its prose conclusion, verses 1 through 14. As we said last time, introducing this, it reads a lot like the book of Proverbs, and I'm not sure that I really understand. I know that I don't understand some of the connections that he makes, but the overall theme is impossible to miss. Let me say again, although the language is dark and it's despairing at times, it is beautiful language, and we have that to enjoy. So we're going to look at verses 1 through 8 today. This exists in couplets, the way Proverbs does, You'll have a statement and then a second statement that connects in some way. It either reinforces or it shows the flip side of the coin, or it develops the thought. So we have couplets that are linked together today in this poetic passage. But what I don't get is, especially with the first couplet, how do they connect? A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for this is the end of all mankind. And the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fools. This is also vanity. Surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient spirit is better than the proud in spirit. I think the overall lessons are clear and unmistakable. A good name is better than precious ointment. Of course we know this. I mean, this is, we've heard something similar in Proverbs multiple times. But how is that connected to the day of death than the day of birth? Other than, one thing is we talk about how things are better. The day of death than the day of birth. Why would he say that? And how is that true? That's such a difficult, if you're taking eternity out of the equation, if all you have is life, if, as he says later in chapter 9, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, because there's nothing you can accomplish in the grave where you're going, then this defies, for me, that logic. If we think about eternity, other than it brings an end to nothingness, or it brings us to a different nothingness. It's not a wasteful nothingness, it's a serene nothingness. In other words, if life is nothing but a wasteful, rebellious nothingness, then passing away means at least the waste ends and the rebellion ends. Maybe he's saying that, I don't know. Some commentators wonder whether he's talking about one's own death or the death of another person. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. I think this is easier for us to understand. Here recently, this congregation has had a terrible loss in the congregation, and yet we have experienced a great deal of love, of closeness, of closeness to God, of clarity, of life. I think we understand that. When you're just laughing and having a good time, those are the times when you're vulnerable, when we're apt to lose control or to go too far and to hurt someone and not mean to. I mean, think of those who go out with friends never intending to drink to excess, and then they do, and then they are involved in an accident, maybe hurt someone else, ruin their lives. Sobriety, and not just as opposed to drunkenness, but sobriety, to live life soberly, is ultimately going to produce more happiness and more satisfaction in our lives than a life of mirth. And the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. I think it's cool that when you read Tolkien's literature, Gandalf, the wise, is wise because his first job was to tend the Hall of the Dead. And he spent, millennia tending to the souls of those who have passed and in communion with them. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than the laughter of fools. He didn't say the praise of fools, he says the laughter of fools. I think that's interesting too, and it's a distinction that I'm sure I don't fully appreciate, but I recognize the distinction between, saying praise, not saying praise, but saying laughter. We want things to be, we equate happiness with and even joy with mirth. And he's telling us stop. Mirth has its place, but if it's just the laughter of fools, and a fool is not necessarily a person in Hebrew who is silly, but a person who is worthless, a person who contributes nothing to the lives of others, a person who exists only to squander, to extract, and to waste. That's a fool. Mirth with that person, as that person, no, absolutely not. That is in no way valuable. And he calls it the crackling of thorns under a pot. So, the branches of thorn bushes will burn readily and they'll make a lot of sound, but they will not burn for very long. They'll give you no light and no heat, not for any length of time. It's worthless. It's pointless. It's just loud. That's all it is. Oppression drives a wise man to madness. Why would it do that? Is it because of the injustice of it all, that it doesn't add up, or is it because of his compassion for his fellow human being? And I think the answer to that is yes, it would have to be both. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning. The patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. We certainly know the wisdom of that. Well, we're going to pick up with verse 9 next time. We're going to read through the end of this passage in verse 14. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.